Hello, everyone. Have you ever felt it, that whisper in the dark? A silent, persistent tug, pulling you towards something you crave, something you chase, even when you know deep down it might not be good for you. That insatiable hunger, the relentless pursuit, the dizzying climb for more, for better, for different. We call it ambition, passion, drive. We celebrate it. We are told it is the very engine of... But what if that very engine, that very fire, is not the key to your freedom, but the forge of your very chains? What if the desires you cherish, the urges you obey, are not expressions of your liberty, but the subtle, insidious architects of your deepest captivity? This isn't some abstract philosophical riddle. This is a question that gnaws at the heart of every human soul, a question that rings with chilling clarity. And 2,000 years ago, a man who once embodied the very pinnacle of human zeal, a man who knew the intoxicating power of unbridled conviction, unveiled a truth so raw, so revolutionary. It shattered the foundations of his own world and continues to echo through ours. He was called Paul, the Apostle, but before that he was Saul. And his story is not merely a tale of conversion. It is an epic saga of a soul wrestling with the very definition of freedom, caught in a cosmic battle between the spirit and the insidious grip of self. Well, prepare yourselves. We are about to plunge into a narrative that challenges everything you thought you knew about control, choice, and the unseen forces that dictate our lives. Are you truly free, or are you a prisoner of your own? The answer might surprise you, and it began on a dusty road under a blistering sun, before he was Paul, the visionary apostle, the prolific writer, the intrepid missionary. He was Saul, and Saul was a force of nature. Imagine a mind sharper than any blade, a will forged in absolute conviction, a spirit burning with a zeal so intense it bordered on fever. He was a Pharisee of Pharisees, born into the tribe of Benjamin, trained under the legendary Gamaliel himself. He knew the law, every jot and tittle, every intricate command, every ancient decree. He lived it, breathed it, embodied it, to Saul. The law wasn't just a set of rules. It was the very blueprint of God's perfect order, the pathway to righteousness, the sacred covenant that defined his people. And anyone who dared to deviate, anyone who dared to twist its meaning, anyone who dared to claim a new path outside its hallowed boundaries, they were enemies. Enemies of God, enemies of truth, enemies of the very fabric of existence. Saul's conviction wasn't a casual preference. It was an all-consuming fire. He wasn't merely a believer. He was an enforcer, a sentinel standing guard against what he perceived as heresy, a guardian of the sacred flame. And when a new burgeoning sect began to spread like wildfire through the Roman Empire, a sect proclaiming a crucified Nazarene as the long-awaited Messiah, a sect that dared to speak of a new covenant, of grace over law, of love over rigid tradition, he saw blasphemy. He saw chaos. He saw a direct assault on everything he held dear, everything he believed was holy. His desires were clear, unyielding, absolute: to uphold the law, to purify his people, to eradicate this dangerous, deceptive cult known as the Way. He desired justice as he understood it. He desired order. He desired to serve God with and it was these very desires, these burning convictions, that made him a terror. He pursued the followers of Jesus with relentless fury, dragging men and women from their homes, casting them into prison, even standing by a silent, approving witness. As Stephen, the first martyr, was stoned to death, he breathed threats and murder. He was a hunter, relentless, merciless, driven by a profound certainty. He was free, wasn't he? Free to choose his path, free to act on his beliefs, free to pursue what he believed was righteous. He was a man of action, a man of power, a man of unwavering resolve. He was Saul of Tarsus, and he was absolutely convinced of his own rectitude, his own freedom. Yet, in the eyes of eternity, in the unseen chambers of his own soul, Saul, a prisoner of his own fervent desires, his own unexamined zeal, his own blinding self-righteousness. His desire for an ordered law, abiding faith had become a cage, a lens that distorted truth and justified unimaginable cruelty. His conviction, once a beacon, had become a consuming inferno, burning away compassion, empathy, and the very possibility of seeing beyond his own rigid. He thought he was serving God, but he was serving the very intensity of his own will, the unyielding demand of his own intellect to be right. He was trapped in the iron grip of his own perception, enslaved by the very passions he believed were driving him toward divine favor. And then the universe intervened. The stage was set. Saul, armed with letters of authority from the high priest, was on his way to Damascus, his heart pounding with righteous indignation, his mind alight with the mission to root out these heretics. He rode with purpose, a juggernaut of conviction, utterly convinced of his path, his destiny, his divine mandate. The dust kicked up by his horse's hooves was a mere prelude to the cosmic upheaval about to unfold. The sun, usually a benevolent master in the Middle Eastern sky, became an instrument of divine confrontation. Suddenly, without warning, a light from heaven, a blinding, incandescent glory, more brilliant than 1,000 suns, flashed around him. It wasn't just light, it was an interruption, an invasion, a tearing of the veil between worlds. He fell. He crashed to the earth, not with a controlled descent. His companions, stunned, stood speechless, hearing a sound but seeing no one. But for Saul, it was a cataclysm. A voice resonant with untold power, a voice that pierced through the very marrow of his bones, spoke to him from the heart of that blinding light. "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" The words hung in the air, not as an accusation from an earthly judge, but as a lament from the heavens, a question that ripped through his carefully constructed reality. Who was this? Who dared to challenge him? The righteous Saul, the defender of the law. "Who are you, Lord?" he stammered, his voice reduced to a trembling whisper, his body prostrate, helpless, utterly undone, and the voice, now tinged with a sorrowful majesty, delivered the fatal blow to his former self. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." Imagine the shattering impact every foundation, every belief, every justification, every shred of certainty that Saul had ever clung to, evaporated in an instant. The man he had despised, the man he had believed was a blasphemer, the man whose followers he had hunted with such zeal, that man was not only alive, but was now speaking to him from the very glory of God. He was not just a man, he was Lord, and by persecuting his followers, Saul had been persecuting him. In that singular, earth-shattering moment, Saul was not merely humbled, he was annihilated. His vision, once so clear in its righteous indignation, was now literally gone, blinded by the light of absolute truth. His desires, once so pure in their misguided fervor, were exposed as instruments of cosmic error, tools of a profound and tragic misunderstanding. He had thought he was free, operating from a place of divine mandate. He was, in fact, enslaved to a false understanding. This was the ultimate prison break, not by Saul's own will, but by divine intervention. He was led, stumbling, sightless, into Damascus, a man utterly broken, utterly stripped of everything he thought he was. For 3 days he neither ate nor drank, wrestling with the seismic shift in his universe, grappling with the devastating realization that his life's work had been a catastrophic error, an assault on the very God he sought to serve. This was the moment of his profound unfreedom, unveiled by the light of truth. He had been a slave to his own zeal, his own interpretation, his own furious desire. This encounter didn't just change his name from Saul to Paul. It didn't just alter his trajectory. It ripped open the very fabric of his understanding about what it meant to be human, what it meant to be free, and what it meant to be bound. It showed him, in the most brutal and undeniable way, that the most dangerous chains are not those imposed from without, but those forged within by our own unchecked desires. His journey from this point was not a simple linear ascent. It was a tortuous, often agonizing process of shedding layers of self, confronting the lingering ghosts of his past, and grappling with the profound implications of his Damascus Road experience. The physical blindness was temporary, but the spiritual blindness it represented was a lifelong battle. When Ananias, a disciple in Damascus, was sent to heal Saul, the scales fell from his eyes, both literally and figuratively. He was baptized, filled with the Holy Spirit, and immediately began to preach Jesus in the synagogues, astonishing all who heard him. Imagine the sheer audacity, the bewildering pivot. The persecutor had become the evangelist, The hunter had become the hunted. But this rapid change, while miraculous, didn't erase the deep-seated patterns of his former self, his past, his reputation, his deeply ingrained tendencies. These were not simply vanished. He faced suspicion from the very Christians he now championed and violent opposition from the Jews who had once been his allies. He was a man caught between worlds, an enigma, an outcast, forced to forge a new identity in the crucible of divine grace and human rejection. Paul spent years in Arabia, in Tarsus, in quiet introspection, away from the immediate spotlight, wrestling with the implications of his encounter, allowing the seismic shift to settle, to take root. And it was in this period of solitude and profound contemplation that the truth of human captivity to desire, and the path to genuine freedom, began to crystallize within him. He began to understand that the external chains of persecution were nothing compared to the internal chains of a self-serving ego, a self-righteous will, a self-generated system of belief that could justify any action, even murder. He realized that his fierce dedication to the law, while seemingly virtuous, had become a prison. It had promised righteousness, but had delivered only condemnation. It had highlighted sin, but provided no power to overcome it. And this became the cornerstone of his revolutionary revelation. It wasn't enough to simply switch allegiances from persecuting Jesus to following him. The deeper battle, Paul, the apostle, the one chosen by Christ himself, still felt the relentless tug of his old nature, the echoing whispers of his former self, the insidious pull of desires that opposed the Spirit. This is where his profound psychological insight, his deep understanding of the human condition, truly shines. And he laid it bare for all to see, in words that resonate with stark, brutal honesty. In his letter to the Romans, a profound treatise on the human struggle, he famously articulated this internal war. He spoke of the law, that ancient, sacred code, designed to show humanity its shortcomings, its inability to perfectly align with God's will. The law, he argued, was not the problem. The problem was humanity itself. We know that the law is spiritual, he wrote, but I am unspiritual, sold as a slave to sin. Not just occasionally stumbling, not just making mistakes, but an inherent, almost genetic predisposition to misalignment, to gravitating towards self-serving desires. Even when we know better, he continued with a visceral, gut-wrenching honesty that speaks to the deepest anxieties of the human heart. For I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. The greatest apostle, the man who brought the gospel to the Gentiles, a spiritual titan confessing, openly, that he often found himself doing the exact opposite of what his true spiritual self desired. He found himself acting on impulses, giving in to temptations, yielding to the gravitational pull of his lower nature, even when his higher self, his conscience, his awakened spirit, the late-night scroll that turns into hours of lost sleep, the impulse buy that empties your wallet, the harsh words spoken in anger that you instantly regret, the promise made to yourself that you consistently break. We desire health, but crave junk food. We desire peace, but engage in petty arguments. We desire financial stability, but succumb to impulsive spending. We desire genuine connection, but hide behind digital screens. We hate the outcome, but repeat the action. We know the path to freedom, but keep walking towards the precipice of captivity. This is not weakness. This is a description of the human condition, a testament to the powerful, often unseen forces of desire that operate beneath the surface of our conscious will. Paul goes deep. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do. This I keep on doing. He spoke of an internal law, the law of sin, at work in his members, constantly warring against the law of his mind. Imagine it as a silent, invisible struggle, a cosmic wrestling match occurring within the very confines of your soul. One part of you, the awakened, higher self, longs for truth, for goodness, for genuine freedom, for alignment with the divine. The other part, the old nature, the flesh, the untamed desires, pulls with relentless force towards immediate gratification, self-preservation, comfort, pride, anger, lust, envy, all the ancient primal urges that promise satisfaction but deliver only temporary relief, leaving a deeper void in their wake. This isn't just about big, dramatic sins. It is about the subtle, insidious ways we become slaves to our preferences, our opinions, our comforts, our need for approval, our fear of rejection. It's the way we procrastinate when we know we should act. It's the way we cling to resentments when we know we should forgive. It's the way we scroll endlessly through social media when we know there are more meaningful ways to spend our time. Each of these moments, each of these choices, when driven by an unexamined, unmastered desire, reinforces a subtle chain, tightens an invisible bond, pulling us further from our true, liberated selves. Paul's revelation wasn't just a theological doctrine, it was a profound psychological insight, a deep dive into the very architecture of human behavior and motivation. He saw clearly that our greatest adversary wasn't some external force, but the untamed landscape of our own hearts, the chaotic wilderness of our unmastered desires, and the cry of his soul, a cry that echoes through the ages, is one of existential anguish. Wretched man that I am, who will rescue me from this body that is subject to death? This is the question that haunts every earnest seeker of truth, every individual who has ever looked in the mirror and seen a stranger, someone driven by impulses they don't fully understand, someone trapped in patterns they long to break. We are all, to varying degrees, wretched in this sense, caught in the grip of our own internal contradictions, prisoners of desires that promise freedom but deliver only a more sophisticated form of bondage. So if even Paul, the apostle, felt this profound internal conflict, this relentless battle against the desires of the flesh, what hope is there for us? Are we destined to live in this perpetual state of internal warfare, forever doing what we hate, forever chasing what disappoints? Is true freedom an elusive myth, a cruel joke played on the human psyche? This is the climax of the human predicament, the moment of profound despair, the recognition that our own efforts, our own willpower, our own determination are simply not enough to break these deep-seated chains. But Paul, ever the beacon of hope, does not leave us in this abyss of despair. His very next breath, his very next declaration, unveils the astonishing truth that thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. This wasn't a platitude. It was a battle cry, a triumphant declaration of victory over the internal tyrant of self. The rescue, the liberation, the breaking of the chains does not come from within ourselves, from a stronger will or a more disciplined mind. It comes from outside, from a divine intervention, from a radical reorientation of our entire being. Paul's revelation wasn't that we should simply try harder to suppress our desires. He understood the futility of that approach. The more you fight a powerful current, the more exhausted you become, the more easily you are swept away. No, his revelation was that the very power to overcome the law of sin at work in our members comes through a new relationship, a new life, a new spirit dwelling within. He recognized that the solution wasn't self-mastery through sheer force of will, but surrender to a higher power, a divine master who could re-engineer the very landscape of our desires. This is the core of Paul's message of freedom. We are set free, not by our own efforts to perfectly obey the law, but by the grace of God through faith in Jesus Christ. This isn't a license to indulge every whim, it is the empowering truth that gives us the capacity to truly choose, to truly live beyond the dictates of our lower nature. How does this work? Paul explains it as a death and a resurrection. Our old self, the self enslaved to sin and driven by unchecked desire, is crucified with Christ. It dies, and a new self, a new creation, empowered by the Holy Spirit, is resurrected. This is not merely a symbolic act. It is a profound spiritual reality that transforms the very essence of who we are. It's a complete overhaul, a divine reset button for the soul. Think of it this way. If your desires are a powerful river, you can try to build dams, fight the current, or swim against it. But Paul suggests a different approach, changing the course of the river itself, or even more profoundly, being lifted out of this new life. This true freedom is characterized not by the absence of desire, but by the transformation of desire. Our deepest longings, once pointed towards fleeting pleasures, towards self-aggrandizement, towards earthly acquisitions, are now recalibrated, realigned towards higher purposes, towards eternal values, towards the loving heart of God, and the well-being of others. Paul himself, the former persecutor, now burned with a new passion to share the gospel, to build up the church, to love his enemies, to endure hardship for the sake of Christ. His old desires had held him captive in a prison of self-righteous fury. His new desires, divinely implanted, propelled him into a life of unparalleled service, sacrifice, and true, boundless liberty. He became a living he moved from being a prisoner of his own zeal to a willing servant of Christ, from a slave to the law to a freeman of grace. And this freedom wasn't an easy ride. It was a life fraught with perils, persecutions, shipwrecks, beatings, and imprisonments. Yet, through it all, Paul found an unshakable joy, an indomitable peace that transcended his circumstances. Why? Because the chains that truly mattered, the chains of his own untamed desires, had been broken. He was no longer doing what he hated, but pursuing what he loved, driven by a new spirit, a new purpose that transcended the fleeting desires of the flesh. In his letter to the Galatians, he further elaborated on this dynamic, contrasting the works of the flesh with the fruit of the Spirit. The works of the flesh are the manifestations of our unredeemed desires, the predictable outcomes of a life lived apart from divine guidance, sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. These are the prisons we build for ourselves, the chains that bind us in endless cycles of emptiness and regret. But the fruit of the Spirit, these are the manifestations of true freedom, the natural outflow of a life transformed by divine grace, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. This isn't a list of things we have to struggle to. This is the natural harvest, the organic growth that blossoms when our lives are rooted in the Spirit, when our desires are realigned with God's will, when we surrender the reins of our inner life to a higher power. Notice the last one, self-control. This isn't the painful suppression of desire, but the empowered mastery of desire born from an inner transformation. It is the ability to choose what is good, what is true, what is life, giving not because we must, but because our deepest desires now align with it. It's the strength to say no to the fleeting, destructive impulse, and yes to the lasting, fulfilling purpose, not out of grim obligation, but out of a liberated spirit. So where do you stand in this ancient, ongoing battle? Are you truly free, or are you, like Saul before Damascus, a prisoner of your own making, bound by the very desires you believe define your liberty? Do you find yourself doing what you hate, caught in a cycle of regret, endlessly chasing satisfaction that always slips through your grasp? Do you feel that gnawing whisper, that relentless tug, pulling you towards choices that leave you feeling emptier, more fragmented, less truly yourself? Perhaps it is the insatiable desire for approval, leading you to compromise your values. Perhaps it is the relentless pursuit of wealth, blinding you to the richness of human connection. Perhaps it is the craving for comfort, paralyzing you with fear of change or discomfort. Perhaps it is the grip of anger, keeping you chained to past hurts and unable to forgive. Perhaps it is the lure of instant gratification. These are the unseen chains, the subtle prisons of the modern age. The Apostle Paul, from the depths of his own profound struggle and glorious liberation, offers us a way out. He invites us to confront our own internal battlefield, to acknowledge the relentless tug of our lower nature, and to cease our futile attempts to break free by sheer human will alone. He calls us to a radical surrender, a profound turning point, a Damascus Road moment for our own souls. Not necessarily a blinding light from heaven, but a conscious decision to lay down the weapons of self-reliance and embrace the transformative power of a love greater than our own, a spirit more powerful than our own desires. He calls us to recognize that true freedom is not the absence of restraint, but the embrace of the right restraint, the loving boundaries set by a divine architect who knows the blueprint of our souls better than we do. It's the freedom to become the person we were always meant to be, unburdened by the tyranny of self, unleashed into a life of purpose, joy, and profound peace. This is the invitation of the ages, to step out of the shadow of our own desires and into the glorious light of a freedom that transcends circumstance, a peace that defies understanding, a love that conquers all. It is a journey not of suppression, but of transformation, not of willpower, but of surrender, not of striving, but of receiving. The chains you feel, the struggles you face, the whispers in the dark, they are not your ultimate identity. You are called to something more, something profoundly liberating. You are called to be truly free. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of freedom. If this exploration of Paul's profound revelation resonated with you, if it sparked a flicker of understanding or hope, please remember to hit that like button. And if you want to continue diving deep into ancient wisdom for modern living, subscribe to our channel and join our growing community. We'll be here unraveling more mysteries, exploring more truths, and seeking guidance for the profound journey of life. That is all for today's video. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.